wealthier black people and the days of black business class is not anchored to the community anymore. As a partial result of that, the organizations that used to enable folks to fight Jim Crow, they started looking elsewhere for contributions. Anybody here know who paid for the FCLC's wonderful headquarters down there on Auburn Avenue? Come on.
Georgia Power?
You got it. You got it. Georgia Power, okay, paid for the FCLC. Has anybody ever here heard the phrase corporate roundtable before?
Sure.
Yeah. You hear it when you talk about the NAACP, the National Conference of Black State Legislatures, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, all of these guys have corporate roundtables. Here's what a corporate roundtable is. A corporate roundtable is, you're AT&T, give me $25,000 or $50,000 a year, and a pledge that you're going to give me that much every year. You can send a black executive to come sit with us, go on retreats with our executive director here, and you can also bring us positions. That's not written anywhere, but it happens. You can also bring us positions that you wish us to espouse. And that's how the National Conference of Black State Legislatures and the National Council of the RASA and some other places, that's why these places are all advocating policies that are friendly to telecoms. That's why two of the last three CEOs at the NAACP were former black telecom executives, you know, and that explains, and that's why. Does anybody know who's going to deliver the keynote at the Urban League convention? Who you after next is? How about Bill Gates? Okay, you know, and he's going to be talking about education too, because the Gates Foundation is all about privatizing education, breaking teacher unions, and bringing in charter schools. And these are the guys who run the Urban League now. And let's not even talk about the National Action Network. Let's not, please not.
Really? Abstracted?
Yeah. You know, so now and churches. Churches. The black church back in the day, as far as fighting Jim Crow, well, the black church kind of overemphasizes its role. I know that in Chicago, where I came from, when Dr. King hit Chicago, most churches wouldn't have nothing to do with him. Okay? They're like, hey, help me out. Yeah, we like you, man. We're all for you, but we're not going to open our doors. It's not going to happen. You know? And that's, from what I understand, that's the way it was everywhere. Now, people rewrite the history, just like people rewrite the history to say that all of them were there at the 1963 March on Washington, all of them were hand in hand with Dr. King all the way. And so they rewrite the history to say that the freedom movement was based in churches, or based in the black church writ large. It really ain't so. There were a lot of black churches who did participate, but the black church writ large was not there for it. That's something afterwards. And in Chicago, where I'm from, Daley, the first Daley, came up with the practice of giving churches free land, free vacant lots. And that's now been adopted as the urban practice nationwide. If you're a big black church in Baltimore, D.C., L.A., Detroit, Chicago, Philly, and you don't have several extra lots, you're not even paying attention. You're delinquent. And many of them, if you are a favored of City Hall, you can become a real estate developer. Okay? You can become a real estate developer.
Or slumlords.
They're really not much on slumlords.
Oh, thank goodness.
The black churches, they're not about preserving housing in many cases for, well, I'm not going to generalize like that, but no, they're generally not slumlords, at least not that I've ever seen.
Okay.
But what they do is if they get, plots of packages, adjacent land, and the big ones, the favored ones, you get to be real estate developers. Now, what is this corporate takeover and this corporate infiltration of what used to be the institutions that people used to fight Jim Crow with mean for us in practice today. What does it mean? Well, you guys were paying attention to that Georgia prison strike back in last December. The NAACP was one of the leading organizations that took part in helping us organize a response to it. At some point, the NAACP left the coalition. There were lots of reasons to leave, you know, but one of the reasons that the NAACP may have left may have something to do with a visit that Ben Jealous paid to the governor's mansion. He got in and out in one day and got to meet with the governor, and soon after that, the NAACP dropped out of the coalition to respect prisoner rights. I can't prove it, but and neither can anybody else, but a number of us believe that the governor dangled some reentry money in front of them. Okay, the governor of Georgia does plan to decarcerate at least 10 or 15,000 people in the next couple of years through what's being called the Governor's Commission on Criminal Justice Reform, which I'll talk about at some length in a few minutes. And the NAACP's role in this is supposed to include lining up Democrats behind the Democrats in the legislature, Democratic votes in the legislature behind the governor's proposal. So we've heard. And you know, what we're seeing of black leadership, this is a model of black leadership which only wants enough to confirm and affirm as the go-to people to make special pleas for set-asides and to be spokespeople on this and that. So our present black leadership, they only want enough education and stuff in order to be able to do that. The Black Caucus in the state legislature, almost all of them supported the demands, opposed HB 87, but not one of them organized a community meeting to explain all this stuff to their constituents. Not one. They voted right, because that was the easy thing to do. You know, but doing actual work in their communities, that's not the model anymore. The model is to do just enough education, just enough agitation to confirm your status as special pleaders, and then let it alone. Oh, and to get reelected. Of course, get out the vote. National Action Network. Well, the other thing too is that in this era of no support coming from black business people and the black community, the NAACP Urban League and National Action Network and them have basically morphed into spokespeople for the administration. That's what you saw when you saw the thing happen with Shirley Sherrod. Okay, some right-wing people, Andrew Breitbart and his people manufactured a fraudulent slur of Ms. Sherrod, and NAAC people, some top NAAC people knew who the Sherrods were and are, but they echoed the White House. No, I'm sorry, I got the order wrong. First, Breitbart manufactured a slur against Sherrod. The White House reacted and said, "Oh, we disavow her. She's a racist. We're going to fire her." And the NAACP, who knew who she was, knew who the Sherrods are, Charlie and his wife, instead of back-channeling the White House and saying, look, you need to check this out. You need to think about this more deeply, their reflex was to turn around and line up with the White House right away. Right away. That was more important. They figured that these are the White House, they must know something we don't. I guess that's the way they figured. But they, because this is the kind of knee-jerk response to you know, you get your money is where you get your ideology, that our black leadership are engaged in. What's my time looking like now?
It is 1:33.
I'm supposed to be finished at what time?
2, I believe.
At 2, okay.
Good time for interaction.
Yeah, I'm running through it so we can take as much time for interaction at the end, and I'm better than 2/3 of the way, or about 2/3 of the way through, so there should be maybe 15 minutes of interaction at the end of this. Okay, I got that far.
Did you want to finish your point on Charlotte Sherrod?
I'm finished with it, that the Sherrod affair was a reflection of the fact that the NAACP took its marching orders from whatever the White House wanted, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how unfounded it is, instead of its own historic roots and, you know, with the people that it actually knew, that it actually had background with. And this is what you've got when the NAACP nationally has, and PUSH too, have taken some conflicted positions as far as education reform and charter schooling and the rest of this. And the Urban League right now is attacking the NAACP for its New York City thing, where they are opposing charter schools in New York City, you know, and charter schools are about the corporate privatization of education. So they are hurting each other in line with the corporate agenda. And this is what makes them not very useful to us in fighting mass incarceration. Community organizing in what I call the post-ghetto has been undertaken by a number of forces. In Chicago, in the 80s, you had a thing called the Beat Rep program. The Beat Rep program were community organizers funded by the Chicago Police Department. Okay? Their job was to put crowds on buses for whenever the mayor wanted a new initiative in the state capitol, to occasionally pack courtrooms when prosecutors wanted to give somebody 1,000 years for something, and to inculcate to people that it's okay to call the cops on your neighbors for whatever reason. You know, and that's what the Beat Rep program was about. Anybody here ever heard of the Gamaliel Foundation? I know you've heard of them. Okay, the Gamaliel Foundation are funded by combination of the mainline Protestant churches or the black adherents to the mainline Protestant churches, and Ford and your big old line foundations. If you go on the website of the Gamaliel Foundation right now, you'll see documentation of the fact that they hold workshops for what they describe as grassroots community activists around the country to tell them that you need to be comfortable with the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation is your friend. Corporate givers ought to be able to set your agenda. That's what the Gamaliel Foundation, it's on the Gamaliel's website. I ain't making this up.
How do you spell it?
Gamaliel. Barack Obama, when he was a community organizer in Chicago, worked for a number of Gamaliel. All the projects he worked for were Gamaliel-funded projects. As far as I know, there were 2 of them. Yeah, and both of those were, you know, I can tell you Gamaliel stories. I was an organizer from Chicago too. I had brushes with them. They never paid my salary, although there were proposals, but they never paid my salary, so they didn't like our projects. What do you guys know about the United Way? Huh? The United Way, if you go to the United Way's website, right now, they've got a thing that describes their corporate partners. Their top 10, let's see if I know them by heart, are IBM, AT&T, GE, Public Supermarkets, Lockheed, Bank of America. Well, anyway, the United Way is, and they describe their kind of charity that the United Way does as what you need to do to be good for your corporate image. And the idea of corporate charity has changed over the generations. I was born in 1950 and grew up in Chicago. In my neighborhood, there was this library called the Blackstone Library. It was marble floors and, you know, this ornate stuff. It was all built with Andrew Carnegie money. okay, back in the 1920s or so. And Carnegie built a huge number of these things all around the country, these public libraries. Back then, you know, he figured that, the old line capitalists figured, well, we've already raped the world, let's give back a few pennies. Nowadays, the model for corporate charity is we give if it's seed money for something else. Hence, the Gates Foundation concentrates its money into agribusiness in Africa, pushing seed variety, GMO seeds, on African countries, and privatizing public education. And these are and shaping the kind of cancer and medical research there is, so that private place is given to so-called intellectual property in scientific research, as opposed to going where curing things leads, and that's really pernicious. Did you know that hepatitis B, right now, a private corporation owns the genome, hepatitis B, and so that inhibits you coming up with a cure that's based on manipulating something to answer the genome, because there's a copyright on it. Somebody owns that. So that's, but that's the Gates Foundation for you, and that's typical of how corporate giving works now. Well, guess what? The United Way is sponsoring community organizers in 160 communities around the country. Where did the organizers come from? The AFL-CIO furnishes them. It says so on their website. You can't make this up. Okay? It says the AFL-CIO has given us the organizing personnel to do projects in 160 cities and towns around the country. And I'm engaged with some folks. We're trying to do a story on that. We're trying to assemble the resources to do some research on what they do around the country. But I can tell you, I'm familiar with some of the projects that these United Way, AFL-CIO community organizers are doing in Chicago and Atlanta, and less so in Houston and Dallas. But I can tell you, but let's talk about the Atlanta one. I ran into the AFL-CIO United Way community organizer at a meeting in some church in Decatur, first week of June. And they said they were organizing against mass incarceration. But what the AFL-CIO person, there was the AFL-CIO person running the meeting, and her lieutenant was somebody from the Gamaliel Foundation. All right? They were pushing HB 633. HB 633 will erase the arrest records of people in Georgia who've been arrested but not convicted of anything.
That ends mass incarceration?
Well, that's the point. That's the point I raised to her. I said, well, gee, what does this do for the 60,000 already locked up? Or the hundreds of thousands who are suffering lifelong disability because of their convictions? And she said, oh, well, we're just picking it, and this is her phrase, not mine. I wish I had recorded it. We're just picking at the toenails of the elephant here, but, it's the best we can do. It's a victory we can actually get. We got a Republican to sponsor this. We got bipartisan sponsorship. We can actually pass this. Politics is the art of the possible. That's her argument. Now, where does that lead? Okay? Where does that lead? That leads to, I think, I don't know what you think, but I think that it's a kind of moral and political fraud to raise the flag of opposing mass incarceration. Oh, yeah, she invited us. I came there with 3 people. I brought 3 people to the meeting. And she invited us to build for a big meeting that they're going to have in Atlanta on mass incarceration. We're going to hear about the morning. And she said we're doing the same thing in Macon and Albany. This week we're going to be in Albany. This week we're going to be in Macon. So they're full-time and they're working this stuff. But really, to raise a flag and gather people together for people who really deserve and want and need a lot more change than you're actually going to fight for is a kind of moral and political fraud. It might be enough to get somebody elected, but it's not enough to get any actual change. And getting somebody elected, getting Democrats elected, is where these people will lead you. It's exactly the same kind of thing that happened to the anti-war movement, where you got millions of folks in the streets when Republicans are bombing, and nobody when Democrats are bombing, if your thing is about gathering people together to support this bill because I know I can get all the Democrats and some of the Republicans to vote for it, then logically you have to support Democrats, because if you oppose any of those Democrats in the state legislature, you're going to kill your own bill. So it's a move-on kind of shoot where you're herding people into a thing where the only way out is to organize them to vote for Democrats. ABLE was the name of that organization. Yep.
Which one? They were doing the,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, where the AFL-CIO person was running the meeting. AFL-CIO, and her card, I think I may have that card. Her card was not even an AFL-CIO card, her business card. It's a United Way business card. Here it is, right there. It's a United Way business card with a United Way email address on it. But she's AFL-CIO, she's CWA. Okay? That's what time that is. So those are the directions that other people are traveling in. Oh, also, the phrase, build a movement to oppose mass incarceration, is on a lot of lips right now. Friends of mine in New York.
They're trying to undermine their Google.
Yeah, friends of mine in New York have been telling me for weeks and weeks about fierce struggles being waged between AFSC and Riverside Church and other people over who's going to get credit for mobilizing this, because there's Democratic Party credit to be had, there's foundation money to be had, and in New York they're going to decarcerate 20,000 or more people in the next little while. And so if you're in line to get some of that money for those decarceration programs, those halfway houses and whatever, that's big money.